Hello and welcome to today's video that is going to show you an amazing method that will always get you the top grades for your descriptive writing. And in a later video I'll show you how it will also work for narrative writing. So here you are, there's an image. Imagine that's the one you're presented with in the exam, and you're asked to write a description suggested by this image. Okay, so you don't have to describe anything actually in it, but just something suggested. Well, in this video I'm going to show you a method by a teacher I really respect called Nick Wells, followed by the method that I've adapted, followed by how I use that as a plan, then some really quick tips as to why forcing yourself to have these sorts of things to do, these methods, really works. Then I'm going to show you each paragraph that I wrote using the method, and that will be the end of the video. So, the Nick Wells method, why I love this is it gives students only 6 steps, which I agree with personally. I think that works really well. And if you've been watching my videos, you'll know how important I think contrast is, and he's introduced that as a method that you should use, and that's definitely going to get you the top grades. And then he's introduced an idea I'd never thought of called the motif. So a motif is a symbol or an idea, that an image really, that just keeps getting repeated throughout the essay in a slightly different way. There's an explanation of what he's calling the motif, and he said it's got to appear several times during the essay. Well, this is a bit wordy for me, and when I tried it myself with my class, I found a simpler version, which is this. So begin by zooming out. So put your camera, I always have 6 cameras in my descriptions, put your first camera far away from what you're describing and give it a viewpoint. And I'll explain what the viewpoints are when we get to the actual bits of writing. Then in the next paragraph you're going to have this symbol or image, the motif. Then, so you're zooming in on that obviously, wherever it is with another camera. Then you're going to move the next camera to another character or something else that's going to have a new viewpoint. And then fourth, you're going to return to the motif again. But here's the cunning thing. The motif won't necessarily be exactly the same object. It will be related to it. And I'll show you what I mean about that. And then you zoom out to a new viewpoint from a new character. And then you have a final zoom, whether it's in or out is up to you, and it goes back to the motif again. Now the wonderful thing about having the motif all the way through is that it knits your writing together, and that shows it has a structure. You're not just describing things at random, and because you need a structure to be able to get the top grades. If the examiner can't see that it's being crafted, you won't get the top grades. And after all, you're looking at it and thinking, well, it's description, isn't it? I'm just going to describe what I see. How do I structure that? Like, what are you on about? Well, this will help you work out how to do that. Okay, let's jump into my plan. So, let's go to the picture first. So I gave this to my students in the lesson. Actually, I'm cheating. It's a different picture, but very similar to this. And I said, write down 3 ideas that come into your head. Don't edit anything. You know, whatever you write down is fine. I probably actually asked them to do as many as 6, but 3 is plenty. And the idea is that by the time you get to the 3rd idea, you're coming up with something interesting that 70% of other students will not be writing about. Okay, well, then I said to them, right, I picked a student. I said, right, give me your idea. And he gave me an aeroplane crash. So rather than going off on holiday and having a great time, his 3rd idea was that we're going to have a crash. So I said, okay, well, I'll do that, and I'll show you how I do the plan. So first, next to zoom out, I just thought, well, what am I going to have that's got this outside perspective of the aeroplane? I know, I'll just have some birds. I'll make it a flock of geese. All right, you've got to put a motif now in, sir. A symbol or an image. Okay, I'm going to put a guitar in there. Now, at this point, my students are saying, well, what's a guitar got to do with the plane crash? And the answer is, I've no idea. I haven't got a clue. I'm not editing in my head. I'm just putting down the first idea that comes in. And that's important, okay? Because it's going to force me to be original and creative, and it's also going to stop me worrying. So it's a guitar. Then I'm going to zoom in. Whose face am I going to zoom in on? I know, I'll have the face of a stewardess. Then I've got to go back to the motif. What will I do? Well, I started with the guitar, so I'm going to have some music of some sort in there. No idea what it is, but that doesn't matter. Right, now you've got to zoom out in the method. Okay, well, I've had the geese outside, but it's going to be a crash. People are going to be praying. Maybe I'll have a godlike perspective. And then finally, I've got to go back into my motif again. Will I have some new aspect of music? No, I'll chuck in the guitar. Now, the advantage of this is that's exactly what my plan would look like on the page. Yeah, I'm not writing loads and I'm not thinking. The other advantage of that is I'm just going to trust that this will force me to think. I'll have a paragraph about each one, so I'll have 6 paragraphs minimum written. Some of them might be longer. Okay, how does that work in practice? The V followed its normal trajectory, the lead swapping as though by telepathy in a strange choreography which had developed over millions of years without planes. Perhaps why the lead bird did not notice the Airbus rising towards it. Perhaps why the flock followed blindly, faithful to the goose in front, as the engines rose to meet them like a greeting on a warm summer's day. So the reader has worked out that this is probably a flock of birds. And oh yes, it's geese and they're in a V formation. And I've introduced this idea that they're going to meet the Airbus and that's going to be what causes the crash. Next, I go to the motif, straight into the aeroplane. At the window, Lisa sat, cradling her new guitar. She was 8 years old and going to Nashville to join her father at last. He had given her this red guitar as a present and a promise that he would teach her to play like an angel. Her eyes turned to the window, registering the silent disaster as the birds met the engine on her left-hand side. Something was wrong with this picture, and she thought she heard the guitar begin to play. Okay, well, that works. What am I going to do next? Well, apparently I have to zoom into a stewardess's face. The stewardess with the blonde hair and the tired eyes, fed up of passengers asking her question after question, trip after trip, felt it first, as though she were a Jedi Knight feeling a disruption in the Force. She smiled, realised that her boyfriend would be surprised at the Star Wars reference. But something was wrong. This wasn't turbulence. There was a disruption in the Force. Okay, what do I have to do next? Oh, I've got to go back to the motif and I've got to mention some music of some sort. Alright, I know, the theme tune, Star Wars. In slow motion, the theme tune played. Dum 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 da dum dum da dum. An image of black boots and a black helmet appeared. Instantly she knew the symbol for what it was. She suddenly realised why he was called Darth, a short syllable away from total blackness, eternal blackness, the coming of blackness. All right, well, what's next? Oh, I can't think. Well, I can, because suddenly thinking about music made me think some more. I was sitting in a class with students who didn't all want to work while I was working, and so I decided that one of them was going to be on this plane as a representation of them. And what was irritating me was the constant desire to ask me questions, which I couldn't answer because I was writing this at the same time they were, and also they needed to practice exam conditions, and so they couldn't ask me questions because in the exam I won't be there. So Bart was playing on his phone again. At 16 he knew better than to have the volume turned up so that the middle-aged couple next to him could hear his appalling music leaking out of his ears in a slow trickle that had built up to a flood, drowning them both in unexpressed anger as the flight wore on. How the music had droned. The wife saw the geese first, and some part of her brain, the reptilian part she knew, suddenly kicked in. Anger rose in her like fire, no, like petrol thrown onto a fire, and flames of rage, huge and overwhelming, strobed the back of her skull. She turned to the boy, placed one hand on his earphones, and prepared for what she knew was coming. He looked into her eyes and watched her lips move. We don't need no education. We don't need no... But he would never know what she didn't need. Now I put that in because I had time, and this is a paragraph that you don't necessarily need in your writing if you're not used to writing over 500 words in your 40 minutes. Okay, now I zoom out again because that's what the plan told me to do. So I've got to have some space-eyed view or God. Who was it who gazed down silently at the scene? The pilot looked up as though in prayer. He had felt it too and knew the procedure, the checklist that he and his co-pilot would jump into, the years of training kicking in, but he feared this would not be enough. He looked up, hoping for a sign. Only the clouds gazed back at him. Lisa noticed too, fluffy like a child's drawing, unreal, but they looked down with indifference. Oops, I better reveal that to you. There it is. Okay, now that could be my ending. I could have finished there, but I needed a final zoom because that's what my plan said. In seconds, the entire flock was gone. The engines roared with flame and triumph or rage, it was impossible to tell. The clouds looked on sightlessly without care. The stewardess turned towards the flash of red. Lisa had lifted her guitar and was taking it out of the case for the very first time. So that worked. I didn't know how I was going to end this. I didn't understand where the story was going or the description was going, and I just trusted to the method, and the method worked. I did tell you I'd show you why the method works, and I'm just going to do that briefly in an analogy. So imagine that you're Shakespeare, or anybody indeed. Imagine it's you, and you have to write a sonnet. So here are 8 rules of writing a sonnet. I'm not going to go through them. The point is there are 8 rules to writing a sonnet, which is only a 14-line poem. And that's super hard. How on earth can you follow 8 rules when you're writing something that short? But that's what makes it work. Because you have to follow these rules, it forces you to be creative. And that's exactly what we've just done, what you've just seen me do under time conditions with my students. If you take a look at this screen, don't worry about reading it. Here's 8 rules that my favourite writer of all time uses. That's Kurt Vonnegut. And here are 6 rules that I use with my classes. And I should probably make a separate video on these actually, but if you go back over the story and the description, is that you see I'll start every sentence with a different word where possible. I've set myself a stupid idea of having a particular word that I've got to put in. I'll have one sentence that is at least 30 words long. I'll have another sentence which has at least 4 verbs in it. I'll end at least one paragraph with just a really short sentence, and I'll have a contrast in each paragraph. So I may teach you that in another video, but my point is, when you have the strict rules, it forces you to be creative. Okay, let's go back to what the 6 rules are that you're always going to use. Here they are. So please practice write under time conditions, and then I'd be really grateful if you submit some of them to me as a comment. Only if you'd like me to take a look at them and make a video out of them. Otherwise, you know, don't do it. But if it's any good, if it's a grade 7 or more, I'll make a video out of it and I'll show you how to improve it to a 9. Well, thank you very much for watching as always, and don't forget to subscribe if you want more.